Good day, folks. This is Talking About here on WESN, your content capital. Sean Michael Small here once again to have the discussions with you good people of TNT. I have to admit, these days I'm starting to wonder if maybe things are getting untenable. I have friends who have either already made a decision to migrate or are potentially thinking to migrate. Crime is one of the factors. But then I think to myself, well, if we all leave TNT, who will be left to try to keep things from falling apart? And when I say, not just me, I'm talking about all of you good people out there who read the news, who lament about the state of things, but at some point we have to do something about it. We can't just say, well, government, you do something about it. First of all, I don't know why we have so much faith in any government of the day when we complain about the government all the time. But second of all of these situations come from us. The criminals, the politicians, the police officers, good, bad, in between, they're Trinbagonians just like you and me. And yes, political ambitions or criminal aspirations or, you know, we don't all have those things. But at the end of the day, a human being is a human being. And we have to ask ourselves, what is different about TNT today compared to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? All right, there's a couple of news stories, I think, that prompts these questions that came out that I saw this morning. So let's start off the daily review. And the first story that I wanted to get into today actually is not a doom and gloom and we must do better story. It's actually good news, believe it or not. And one could argue, you know, the Minister of Everything, he's done it again. Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Stuart Young, he has announced that the United States special license arrangement that we have to allow us to make deals with Venezuela over the drug and gas, now we can use cash. Whereas before, we weren't allowed to pay Venezuela in cash, now we could use cash. And the license has been extended, I believe, to 2025, October 2025. So one might say, well, it's 2 years again. October the 31st, 2025, that's more or less 2 years away. Either I read somewhere, I've been told by someone that on a technical level, this is how the licenses are given out. They can't give more than 2 years. So while some people might be concerned that it's only for 2 years, there's a certain amount of unofficial reassurance. Well, no, this is just how it's done, and it could be renewed, and it could be renewed, and it could be renewed. And the reason why I think it's reasonable to assume that to be true is because not too long ago, the situation was that we couldn't give Venezuela any cash. And through diplomatic efforts now, we have been granted permission to give Venezuela cash. Our position basically improved. There's no reason to think that this is going to be a temporary short-term thing that they don't really intend to allow to go through. Because to some extent, they also extended the arrangement, right? To a little bit. I won't be surprised if, technically speaking, maybe they had to issue a new license, so we automatically got a new 2-year period starting from this month. Now, it still comes with the caveat that it's going to take a while to actually get this thing rolling, right? It's going to take a couple of years at least. Of course, now there's also hopes for the Manatee Field, but that's going to take a while as well. But this is still good news because hopefully what this means is Maduro will not back out of the deal. Like we saw when there was an incident in the Ministry of Energy and their energy minister was dismissed, to say the least. And there was a scandal with regards to corruption there with certain deals that the ministry made. And that seemed to have been a major hiccup with regards to our deals and our arrangements because that energy minister was involved. So already anything he had a hand in would then fall under suspicion by the Maduro administration. So hopefully now this is a sign that however things goes, it'll be smooth sailing. It might just take a while for us to reap the benefits. But kudos to the Minister of Energy, because I actually am somewhat surprised, just a little bit, that he was willing to, that the American government rather was willing to come from that position of not giving Maduro cash. But I think potentially it could have been, as Karen pointed out previously, also the fact that the situation in Ukraine and Russia is not going to end anytime soon. And even if it does, to what extent will Europe be willing to buy natural gas from Russia and depend on them for strategic resource? So even if that war ended tomorrow, I think the questions for Europe's energy needs and other parts of the world's energy needs to be more stable would still, to some extent, have to look to Venezuela, with just too much resources to leave, on the table unused like that. So the diplomatic pressure internationally potentially worked in our favor. Either way, though, hopefully it means that 2028, 2029, 2030, TNT could stabilize with its cash flow. Now the question is, if that happens, what will we do with it? Will we just give all the money away like certain other administrations did? Not just one I'm talking about, but multiple. Or will we actually look to long-term investments? And not just human investments in the form of grants and loans and special projects that we don't actually see any returns from. GATE was a good idea, but implemented very poorly. And all it did is make the job market in TNT somewhat more difficult. And I don't think it made that much of our population competitive on the international job market. I could be wrong, but all right, let's get into the second story. This one, I mean, to some extent, one could argue there's much to say here. They just found a second cache of weapons in Santa Cruz. I mean, I could be wrong, but the last one last week was found in Santa Cruz. Now this one is different. The last one was high-powered rifles, large number of weapons, particularly rifles, some submachine guns, some shotguns, ammunition, of course, as well as it was reported explosives, either blocks of C4 and or deck cord. That last part might have been lost in the shuffle with all the reporting over the last couple of weeks. Now, this haul has a few more Kalashnikov-type weapons, AK-47s, Dragunovs, or whatever, right? Some handguns, I think, if you check on the TTPS website, you could see a Desert Eagle. Not sure what caliber it is, but either way, it's a high-powered pistol, as well as it could be a Colt Python revolver or some sort of Magnum calibered revolver pistol. Not, I mean, overkill for the average criminal, but what also was found was police uniforms. And it was reported both fake police uniforms and authentic police uniforms. Bulletproof vests, boots, sirens, blue lights, silencers or diffusers. Now, this is not the first time that lights and uniforms have been found. So the question is again, what is the point of this? Is it that someone is just being a hoarder and saying, I'm going to stockpile things without a use for it? Usually these things, you don't go out of the way to get authentic police uniforms. These aren't even fake, right? To go out of your way to have these things, Because similar to high-powered rifles, it's one thing to have a 9mm pistol. Police find a 9mm pistol, a 38 special revolver. That is common criminal stuff. High-powered rifles in Santa Cruz, police uniforms in Santa Cruz. Holding on to these things will put up, red flags for the authorities. This is more than just robbing a liquor store or robbing somebody that just came out of the bank. I mean, okay, maybe you might use 2 police uniforms to do that. Eventually, they'll catch up with you, but you might get away with that for a while. But the amount of police jackets that they had, it begs the question, what is it all for? And again, it's the same issue that I had last week. No one was arrested. So to some extent, the ability to now investigate the source of these contraband items, I don't know to what extent they could continue the investigation. They've confiscated the contraband, but to actually get the people who brought it in and to determine why it was brought in so that you have a better chance to prevent whatever the purpose is for, well, all of that now potentially is lost. One could argue you can't just leave this stuff out there, but again, if the people who brought it in on court, just like a couple of years ago, they could do it again. Because we literally, this is not the first time fake police uniforms or authentic police uniforms have been confiscated in our weapons cache. So, in a couple years, maybe next year, maybe even next month, will we see this again? Or even worse, there is a sinister purpose behind having or compiling all of this contraband. And because they can't actually arrest the people involved, they're not going to interdict the action. And eventually, at some point, we'll run out of luck and it'll come to pass. And then somebody will say, oops. Just saying. All right, last couple of stories. I want to get through them kind of quick. First of all, the Minister of Education was being questioned, I believe, in the Finance Committee. And she said that they completed 13 out of 80 schools which the government met unfinished. And the actual technicalities are unfinished. I don't necessarily know, but she was basically saying certain work still needs to be done for them to be occupied. I get it. I think this is not a thing now where it is to throw blame, because the amount of money it probably would take to get all 80 done now, and the minister does say this, and I don't have a reason to disagree with her, it might be disproportionately large amounts of money that could hamper the budget too much. The only thing I have to ask is, one, how is it that we have 67 unfinished schools? What does that mean to our education system and the education shortfall? And then the second thing is, because what is it that they're using temporary arrangements somewhere? Because the other thing is, if some of these schools will add more capacity for more children, demographics and questions on that notwithstanding, where are we going to get the teachers to fully flesh out these schools? Because I can understand some of it might be because we have to put more students in a classroom, per classroom of what currently is operational. So to get an ideal ratio, you have more schools so that you could have smaller number of students per classroom. They get more attention by the teachers, but we have a teacher shortage as well. So this is just another red flag for the education system. And I'm not blaming the current administration. I'm not even necessarily looking to blame the previous administration, although one could assume they were the ones that, left the schools in various states of not being ready. But rather, I think the education system on a whole, we just kind of continue as we've always had and assume this is the right system for us. And I don't know if it's working. Last two stories, I'll just mention them briefly. First, there were 2 children found alone in what was thought to be an abandoned house. It was in a dilapidated state. It was overgrown bushes. There were cockroaches. There were rats. Eventually, one newspaper reported that police went back to the structure after finding 2 children and removing them from the structure because it wasn't safe, really. They went back to the structure a couple hours later. This was all during the night, I believe. 7 p.m., around 7:30, they found the kids, and around 9, they went back, and they found 2 adults who are potentially are the parents who they are now questioning with regards to child abandonment. I think this is, again, if our society is starting to reach into these levels, because the parents left the children, that's apparently where they were living, in a dilapidated house, and they left the children to do Lord knows what. In the evening, why didn't they just take the children with them? The children, it was a big risk, especially all that we've heard about children with regards to the baby last year that went off, wandered off on its own, and ended up found dead, drowned, we believe, in the river. It was a huge risk, but I think this is a bad indicator for society. It's not blame the parents and then that's all there is to it. Why is it that now a situation like this, what sort of factors allowed this to happen? And then finally, the technical fault with regards to the credit card payments with PriceSmart and customers from RBC and potentially other banks. RBL, Republic, has admitted that the fault lies with them. They say it's a one-off. They say it's a one-off and it shouldn't happen again. All I will say is this. I recommend to everybody that can hear me, check your bank statements and your bank transactions over the last couple of months. Just do it. Because to some extent, they don't know, or the authorities don't know for certain how widespread this was. I assume Republic Bank understands what the glitch was, so they're treating it as that. I just hope there are no other glitches. They're saying there isn't. I hope so. Consumer Affairs are still looking at it. The police are monitoring it. But so far, I think no one has necessarily had any complaints on a criminal level to give. But I would say just monitor your own finances, folks, because other glitches can happen. All right, let's take a break. And when we come back, we will have the good lady herself. Stay tuned to Talking Point on WSN. We'll be right back.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Alan's Funeral Home, Tunapuna. Relax. We know the loss of a loved one can be challenging, but we've got your back for all your funeral needs, from documents to the service and or burial. Let Alan's Funeral Home take care of you and your loved ones. We are located on the Eastern Main Road in Tunapuna. Call us today at 663-1829 or visit allansfuneralhome.com. Alan's Funeral Home. Let us take care of business.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizen celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available. The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Chaguanas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's. WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, as we do every Wednesday, except those times when she can't make it, notwithstanding, we do have the good lady of Talking About here herself, former Minister of Finance, Karen Shishera. And on this morning, we just had an update with regards to the Dragon deal. As I mentioned at the top of the show, it's welcome news, it's good news, and of course, the good lady herself, while we do have other things to get to speak about, you know, the opportunity now of this happening today. We need to get a comment from you, Karen.
Yes, and I did say so to Sean immediately when I reached the station. And I don't know if persons recall that, no, I don't have inside information into the Ministry of Government. And yes, there are sometimes coincidences. And the day before, I was trying to get DWSN to pull up that show, program, when I did say that based on the geopolitical, what was going on geopolitically, the fact that PDVSA, well, gas was now what, natural gas is what Maduro seemed to be focusing on, opening up opportunities, encouraging more investment in that area, Europe putting a lot of pressure on the United States, and the ongoing Ukraine war. I did see that the minister, which I did give him credit for, when someone called at the end of the show, and I said, listen, he's very hardworking, he's smart, there are things going on behind the scenes. A day in politics is a lifetime. We don't know exactly what's going on. But what I want to add to that, so I want to congratulate him on that. And I just want to add, and I want people to take it in the spirit in which I am saying it. The reason I made those predictions without a crystal ball was because without access to information, that type of information, I did read Reuters, I read Associated Press, I read a number of things, and I started connecting the dots and realizing it was going to happen. What I did not anticipate, and which is a good news, is that Maduro would agree to so-called free and fair elections and allow international agencies to come in and actually, have some oversight over the election process, and that he would allow any opponents to him to contest, as he had banned Machado, who seemed to be the most viable opponent. That I did not expect to hear from him. But you see, that is, and I'm just going to add, again, not having inside information on it, but I think President Biden is under tremendous pressure, not only from Europe, because even with electric cars get the electricity from natural gas. Yeah, yes. So you could talk electric cars from here till the wazoo. They need electric. That's what they use to power the electricity to drive those cars, number one. When you talk about gas to liquids and hydrogen, all of those, well, hydrogen may be different because they're using water. But the gas to liquids, it's still fossil fuels. But more importantly for Biden, a major issue that has arisen is that the Republicans have been flooding the so-called Democrat cities with migrants in busload by busload by busload, and creating a problem in those cities where there's a lot of poverty existing. And a lot of his supporters are minorities. So he is under pressure in the United States to do something about it. So when you put everything into that basket, it is not unsurprising with the pressure coming from Europe, with the ongoing US Ukraine-Russia war, with the pressure that Biden is undergoing, that he has agreed to allow, and it's a great thing for Trinidad and Tobago, with the dragon field, and therefore it should apply to Lauren and Manatee, because that's where we don't have the gas. It is a good development for us, and I am not in any way taken away from the hard work of the minister, but I am just putting things in context, and I hope people will understand. That is why I called it the day before it was in the papers the next day. I did not know. I was just following the trend, and similarly, following the trend, I'm not surprised at today's development. The only thing that did surprise me was Maduro agreeing to allow for elections to be freer and have the some sort of oversight. But I think he's under pressure now with the deport, because he's not talking about deporting Venezuelans back to back to Venezuela from America, and they still have not released the billions of US dollars that are being held in US banks. That has not happened. But as I say, it's an organic situation, and congratulations to the minister, because regardless of all of what I've said, I am confident that he did play a part while working with the Europeans. Whatever he did play a part in today's results. So we're moving forward, and if we are nationals and we care about our country, we should be able to say congratulations to him. And coincidences do happen. So, but I have to say that, because it was anyhow. But what I had come to speak about, which of course now, because of me having spoken about something, you see, things are so organic and things happen overnight. Yeah. I had not intended.
Before we get into that, I just wanted to clarify, because I told the people, but this doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get dragon gas any faster. We still, as you said before, we have some time to wait for it to come on stream. They are going to go through the Hibiscus platform with the pipeline plan. I believe that's what was reported.
Yes, that's correct.
So for the most part, we did already have a deal on the table. It's just that now Maduro is far less likely to walk away.
Big difference. It's a big difference.
Okay.
Because I think, it is a big difference, because at the end of the day, I think people are willing to tighten their belts, so to speak, and go through a difficult time. Just generally, I'm talking about generally, if they see light at the end of the tunnel. And there's light here. Right. Now, they have given an extension to 2025, but the most important concession that was made was allowing Trinidad through the NGC and to be able to pay for the natural gas in Bolivar, in US dollars, and according to the minister, there has been no limitation on paying that way. So that was the major stumbling block, and as I said, it's a good development. We wait, but we look and wait and see, and I think that is why Shell may have changed its mind, and maybe why Shell was holding back, because they were not happy with the terms that had been first set out. So that's enough on that, and we do look to the future. And if we are true nationals, then we say congratulations, yes? So I wanted to do what I said I was going to speak about, but not in the detail that I had anticipated. We know that the crime is a major issue in the country, and two recent instances really brought it back again to the fore, the extortion attempt that was reported, and of course the jammers that were apparently turned on, although the Prison Services Association had written to the minister 2 days before saying, we don't know where you procure the jammers, we do not know who installed them, we can't speak to that, we certainly didn't. And if you turn on the jammers without putting in place proper systems for people to be able to call at designated places, more than what exists today, and have those calls monitored, until you do that, there is going to be a reprisal, and the persons who they're going to act against are the prison officers. And so let us just put it this way. The Deputy Commissioner of Police, his driver came to collect him.
Deputy Commissioner of Prisons.
Prisons, sorry. Thank you. God, that's another story. That's another story right side. But let's stay with the prisons. Deputy Commissioner of Prisons was being collected by another, his bodyguard, who was also a prison officer. And then, I mean, I don't know if the Commissioner of Prisons thinks that we're going to believe him. But please, I don't believe you. Most recently, there are two other incidents. One, a prison officer saying that he was coming out his car, and he was met by a hail of bullets as he was coming out of his, coming out towards his car, and he had to duck. And when he looked at his car, there were bullets, holes all over his vehicle, and he happened to be a prison officer. And secondly, another prison officer had his vehicle burnt. And that's just off. This is within the last day or two. So I'm sorry, Commissioner of Prisons. I'm going to have a difficulty with believing your take on it. But anyway, what I wanted to speak about as with any time constraints now is that is the trigger. And I wanted to speak a little bit about the death penalty and the Bail Act. And both of them deal with crime. And that relates to the Privy Council as well as the CCJ as the alternative option. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because what we have to understand is that so far as the CCJ is concerned, if I were to read from the decision in what they call the Nerve case, the Barbadian case, they joined the Privy Council, they joined the CCJ. So by the time the Nerve case was heard in 2018, they were already members of the CCJ. And this is what, if this is any indication of the view of the Caribbean Court of Justice on the Privy Council effectively making laws for us and interpreting laws in a way that they feel are inconsistent with democratic Caribbean countries. This is what he said, and I'll explain it after. He said the general savings provision is an unacceptable diminution of the freedom of newly independent peoples who fought with unshakable faith in the fundamental human rights where conflict exists with existing laws and the Constitution. The Constitution must prevail as per the rights and freedoms guaranteed. That's a very strong statement. And in that case, the CCJ determined that in spite of the savings provision, which I mentioned very shortly, or existing law provision, they decided that one could get a lesser sentence for murder than the death penalty. And that in their interpretation was that provision, which dates back to 1925, Section 4 of the Offences Against the Persons Act, that says that any person convicted of murder shall suffer death by hanging. Shall, which is mandatory. And we have seen that provision was enacted in 1925. And what the CCJ, Byron J., who was the president then of the CCJ, Caribbean Court of Justice, was referring to when he said existing laws and constitution, is that in our constitution, whether independent or Republican, one will find, number one, especially with the 1976 one, which is our current constitution, says that Section 1, that Trinidad and Tobago is a sovereign democratic republic. And Section 2 says that any laws that abrogate the rights and freedoms or the provisions of this Constitution shall in effect be unlawful. But at the same time, we have a provision called the existing law or savings provision, which all the Caribbean countries have had. Belize had it for 5 years. they stopped it after 5 years, but all of our jurisdictions have that provision. And in effect, what it says is that an existing law, if there was a law that existed prior to our becoming independent, whichever country, Trinidad is 1962, that law, even though it infringes and abrogates your fundamental human rights as set out in section 4 and 5 of the Constitution, your right to life, liberty, freedom, and all of that, and on and on and on, even if it does all of that, if it is an existing law prior to becoming independence, that law remains the law of that country unless it changes it in Parliament. And that is why you had a slew of cases, starting with Rudal, where a board of the Privy Council came to the conclusion that this existing law provision, as stated in the Republican Constitution, had some sort of, change a little bit and talked about allowing for modification and so on. And therefore, they concluded, that board, under Rudal, which was heard, I think, in 2003, or I believe, that it was according to them, a maximum penalty law, not a fixed penalty. And what is the difference? It means that the maximum could be death, but within that maximum, there is a discretion on the judiciary to give a lesser sentence than death, and not a fixed penalty, meaning that there's no discretion by the judges because it's fixed. And that is how they interpreted it in Rudal. Where the board got, I guess, into a tizzy, they quickly had another new board set up to hear another case called Matthews, and that is the current position as of today in Chandler, all the other cases. And they felt it was very important to do that because they understood that if that Rudal case stood, then it would mean it would affect all the Caribbean jurisdictions that still had the Privy Council as their final court of appeal. We saw that with Pratt and Morgan, where after 5 years they said, yeah, they waited 5 years now. After 5 years, it's unconstitutional. And Trinidad didn't worry to go and challenge it. We knew if we went, we would get the same results. So everybody who was on death sentence for 5 years or more, their sentences were commuted to life. So they recognized the importance of the Rudal decision. And there came Matthews, and there came Chandler. So the point that they made is this, and that's the important point. They have said that that idea that the Section 6 that talks you can modify laws that were existing before, they said that doesn't arise here. There's no question that modify the law is very clear. Section 4 of the Offences of Persons Act 1925 doesn't allow for modification. It says the penalty for murder shall be death by hanging. So it doesn't give room to modify it in any way. So the position that the British Privy Council has determined that in terms of our imposing the death penalty is to say to us that judges cannot reduce the death penalty to anything lesser than the death where you have a person convicted of murder. Now, when the Rudal case was heard in July of 2003, the court did say that when the Matthews case was heard within the next year, July 2004, they said it would be unfair for all those who had the Privy Council decision of Rudal not to have their death sentences commuted to life. So over 240-something persons who were on the death row in Trinidad and Tobago had their life sentences commuted to life. But more than that, once it was commuted to life, it now allowed them, as Rudal did, to go to the High Court and say, well, now it's no longer a death penalty, now it's a life sentence. And under a life sentence, I can come to the court and tell the court there are mitigating circumstances where you can reduce that to a lesser penalty than life, to something, because you look at all the circumstances. And that's the Privy Council. And so we are bound by what the Privy Council is saying to us. They have abolished the death. This is their, they abolished the death penalty long time ago, So they are anti-death penalty in no uncertain terms. And it seems to me they're trying to send us a message, get out of the Privy Council, or we will continue to impose our views on the death penalty on you by how we interpret your legislation. You can't help but come to that conclusion, particularly when you have this statement that I started with from Justice Byron, who clearly feels that this existing law provision is an insult to the freedom of newly independent states. It is almost as if he's saying, well, he's saying it, that the Privy Council is sitting high and mighty with that same colonial mentality and believe that they can come from above and tell us as free people, as independent countries, we can still tell you that you cannot do less than impose the fixed penalty. And if you want to do that, you go to your parliament and do that. Which brings me to the last point for today's, because I don't think I could deal with the Sedition Act, which just came out just the other day. But I can deal with the Bail Act, and because it raises the same issue, but another additional issue. And it really speaks to the extent to which the Privy Council is calling the shots here. And we are allowing it. A lot of countries, I think St. Lucia was the last country, Dominica was one of them, that now have the CCJ as a final appellate court. But I think in many countries you need a referendum. So not in all, but some you do. And it has not worked for places like St. Vincent and Jamaica. But let me get back to the Bail Act. Now, this is the critical difference between what I just spoke about with the death penalty and the existing law, and saying it's not a maximum penalty, it's a fixed penalty law, okay, until you go to the parliament. So they did go to the parliament with the Bail Act. They went just recently, this government, to say that you cannot get bail for murder. And the initial argument was that was because that was the existing law in the United Kingdom, that before 1962 they had by legislation, 1961 legislation, stated that for certain criminal activities, high treason, piracy, and murder, that judges could not grant bail. Well, no, that's not what the Privy Council said. And of course we know what was read up to that was the Achille Charles case. He was at this since 2010. His matter started in 2012. It was still part heard to decide whether he should stand trial. He was innocent till proven guilty, stand trial for murder. It's going on for how many years? 5 years before the now judge, according to the Court of Appeal, but we have to hear. I'm not going to comment on that. Let's say what happened to the Privy Council. Okay, but the point was it reached 20, and then at 2017, that chief magistrate then became issue with her being a judge. So during that time, they appointed an acting chief magistrate who heard his matter, Achille Charles' matter, in 2019, and determined that the police did not have enough evidence for him to stand trial for murder in the assizes, by which time he spent 8.5 years of his life in remand. But the issue now came is that he brought a constitutional action saying, is it constitutional for the government of Trinidad and Tobago to impose and not allow bail for murder, because he based it on existing law. And the Privy Council agreed with the Court of Appeal because, surprisingly, the common law, which common law is judge-made law, and there are a lot of judge-made law cases, and they quoted a lot of the judge-made laws. And they said all the common law in the United Kingdom up to 1962, you could get bail for murder, either before trial and even after trial. And so then they said, well, look, in 1961, they passed a piece of legislation that effectively said that you couldn't do that. They said, no, that's not what it did. What it did, it made it clear that a magistrate could not grant bail for murder, certain cases, murder being one of them. They could only be granted by the High Court, Supreme Court, so that the law had not changed. So in 1962, the existing law was still under the common law, which had not been changed by the 1961 ordinance. Judges of the Supreme Court, High Court, Court of Appeal could grant bail for murder, not a magistrate. But this is the difference between the death and this one. They said there's section 13. Section 13 in our Constitution. Because what the government did, they said, all right, you said that we could only do it if we go to Parliament and change the law. All right, we go into Parliament. And they went to Parliament, and they got what they call a supermajority, which you need when you are going to pass a law that is seen to infringe your human rights human rights under Section 4 and 5 of the Constitution. So you need a supermajority, and in this case, you need a 3/5 majority. They got a 3/5 majority, which said that under the legislation that you could not get bail for murder because they got the 3/5 majority. So we're home free. Well, now, so there we go. But then there's a rider, and that rider is how the Privy Council had chosen to interpret that rider. And the rider is that, yes, the 3/5 majority is enough to change a law that does infringe your human rights. Once you get that, then that's supermajority. But this is the rider in Section 13. Unless it is shown that it was not reasonably justifiable in a society that has a proper respect for the rights and freedoms of the individual. So after hearing all the arguments from the state about the high rise in crime, how, giving bail, they understand that if you give people bail, that you might give them an opportunity to go and commit other crimes, intimidate witnesses, maybe kill witnesses, and, maybe, you take your chance, even abscond. That's the risk. There are lots of risks. But they say you have to balance it. There's something called proportionality. And according to the Privy Council, when they look at the human rights under Section 4 and 5, the individual rights of a person to life, liberty, and freedom, etc., at least under our rights provisions in the Constitution, those rights trump the rights that the state is saying could be impacted. So at the end of the day, what's the bottom line? According to the Privy Council, even though we passed it 3/5, and I'm not supporting for or against the government, but I mean, I'm saying, look at this. I mean, they got the 3/5 majority, but then the Privy Council found a way around it, in my respectful opinion, by applying Section 13, this provision that I just read out, to say, well, you could do that, but you have to abide by this. And then they set out a set of guidelines as to how you weigh one side against the other side. And at the end of the day, they said the individual rights trump, and therefore, in Trinidad and Tobago, even though our Parliament passed the thing, even though the Parliament passed the legislation to say that you could not get bail either pre-trial or post-trial, that law is invalid. And that is the position. And by the way, they said, we don't even have to look at the question of whether we are, there's a conflict of interest between the executive and the judiciary, because it does not arise. The judges always had the right. So what you're talking about, the executive interfering, the law always allowed the judiciary to do this. So there's no interference by the executive. So the long and short of all of what I've said is that dealing with the crime situation, I took this opportunity to take a different approach and really raise the question of, is it time for us to abandon or have the CCJ, move on to the CCJ, particularly in areas where you're making your laws in statute, you're making your laws in Parliament even, and they still find a way to say it's not good enough.
Because it's their worldview being applied to our environment.
Correct.
Now, one question though, I don't know if you were able to read the entirety of the decision, but was any consideration made to the fact that people might spend so long in remand, and potentially if that was shortened to be more reasonable, then it would be more reasonable to say, well, we're not giving you bail, because you won't be stuck in remand forever.
Right, so I do think they looked at a lot of things. They looked at the crime rate, which the Attorney General brought to the attention of the court. They also took to the fact, I think, that the length of time people spend in remand awaiting trial. and saying something probably needs to be done. They looked at everything. But, you know, the long and short of it is not just my opinion at this stage.
Right.
I think they really want to tell us, go and join the CCG. It's costing them money. They don't want to do it. They said that years ago, in a way.
With the Privy Council?
Yeah, the Privy Council. Years ago.
It costs them money as well.
Yeah, because they have to put together the board. And these people are law lords, you know. And, you know, so I think they themselves are sending a message to us. You're not liking what we're coming up with. You're not liking our decisions. We even overturned in your parliament when the parliament was this law. So they are imposing their value system on us. And it's a time that we take control of our country.
And it's not whether or not their value system is better or worse. It's just different because it's based on their country and their culture and what's good for them.
And we are a sovereign, supposedly a sovereign independent state.
Because one could make the argument, right? It's not as though we prefer everything the CCJ does, the Privy Council does. So even if we might not like some decisions from the CCJ, it might still be a net benefit because there are practical considerations with regards to the CCJ.
And it's consistent with being a sovereign state, and I think that's what the Privy Council wants us to do. You set your own value system, and because if you don't, we're going to continue to use our value system, starting with Pratt & Morgan and down the line.
That's a good point. What is our value system? I would make the case that either way, the remand situation, as you've spoken about and I've spoken about, that needs to be fixed regardless if we want to have bail. And also, as you pointed out, we could make the CCJ work for us. But I think one of the things is it's a combination of legislation might need to be updated. Like you could say they tried to do with the bail
special majority. I think you need like a 4/5.
Right.
It's not just 3/5.
But there are other things in laws that need to be updated, but also the systems around it, like our situation with remand, like our judicial process being too slow, needs to be improved.
That's what they talked about too.
But the question of sovereignty is an important one, and it's coming up more and more, folks. But we have to take a break. News on the hours. Next, when we return, we'll open the phone lines. Again, crime waits on no man, so you could call in to speak about that and more after this.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I'm Sarah Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Migrant children to be enrolled in schools with trained teachers. Duma issues warning about significant road collapse. An elderly man was found wandering along Dan Kelly, Laventille. And internationally, Ukraine says it destroyed 9 Russian helicopters in an airstrike on 2 cities. Now for the details. Upon the finalization of the legislation, migrant children will be admitted to schools where educators have received specialized training in this domain. Minister of Education, Dr. Nayan Gazbek-Dolly, conveyed this information during discussions with the Standing Finance Committee on Tuesday. The subject arose when Member of Parliament for Tabakit, Anita Haynes, sought insights into the government's strategy for implementing this initiative. Dr. Gazbek-Dolly elaborated that in 2019, a collaborative effort was established between the Education Ministry, the Catholic Education Board, and the Living Waters community. This partnership led to the selection of certain schools where teachers receive training in this specific area to better accommodate migrant children. Furthermore, she highlighted the presence of ongoing systems designed to provide additional training to educators should the need arise. The Downtown Owners and Merchants Association has issued a public alert regarding a significant road collapse at the intersection of Frederick Street and Queen Street. In an official statement, Duma reveals that this road collapse was triggered by a leaking underground sewer line. Urgent repair work is now underway, being carried out by the Water and Sewerage Authority, necessitating the complete closure of the intersection. Duma has advised that individuals especially southbound traffic on Frederick Street, should seek alternative routes during this period of the route closure. An elderly man was found wandering along Dan Kelly Laventil. He's currently at the Besson Street Police Station. He's unable to communicate his name or address. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is seeking the public's assistance in locating the relative or caretaker of the man. Anyone with information can contact WPC Yearwood at 339-3542 or the Besson Street Police Station at 623-1395. Internationally, Ukraine says it has destroyed 9 Russian helicopters in an airstrike on 2 cities in the Russian-occupied east of the country. A Special Forces statement said an air defense system and other equipment were hit, as well as a munitions dump in the cities of Berdyansk and Luhansk. Dozens of Russian troops were killed or injured in the operation, it added. There has been no independent confirmation of the attack and no comment from the Russian military. Vladimir Rogov, the Russian-appointed governor of the occupied parts of Zaporizhzhia region, said air defense systems successfully intercepted enemy rockets over Berdyansk, adding that information about casualties and damage was being checked and would later be provided. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for watching.
Since they were on sale, Laura bought these umbrella shoes without thinking. Literally, without thinking. Hungry for deals? You'd better come and satisfy it at KFC before doing something crazy. Wow Bucket. 7 pieces of chicken and 4 regular sides for $115. A finger-licking good deal.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com. Welcome back to Talking Point, folks. And as Keaton always says, the conversations off air sometimes can be even more interesting. Karen went on with more points that she did not have time to raise during the time before our previous break. However, now we want to open up the phone line so you, the viewer, could weigh in. I mean, at the end of the day, this is going to be probably something that we're going to have a discussion about ongoing until one of two things happen. We either go with the CCJ or the crime situation gets solved to the point where the issue seems to be no longer as significant, right? And the ability for the latter to happen, you know, the likelihood of that is probably very low. So this is going to be ongoing, especially as you, the viewers, and all, not just you, but also others in various forms of media with access for the public to make comment, call for the death penalty, when technically, as we have said more than once here on Talking Point, and as Karen has reiterated again, the death penalty is actually still on our books. We could still sentence someone to death. Now the question is, could we actually do it? And
I don't think we ever will, but go ahead though.
We do have our first caller from Tunapuna. Good morning, caller.
Yes. Good morning to the panel. The difficulty I have with the discussion on the bail issue is this. Considering the concept of one being innocent until proven guilty, how does one introduce that in the mix in order to ensure that no one remains, particularly in our system, in jail for a considerable amount of time when eventually they are proven innocent? As a matter of fact, we have lots of cases where this has happened. How does one weigh this? Would it be better to leave it to the judges with, examine the issue and determine whether they would grant bail in such circumstances, including murder, of course?
But, so it's not, that hasn't changed, The judges do have that. And both in pretrial, because the person is presumed innocent, they're waiting to hear whether there's enough evidence against them to stand trial in the assizes. So the issue is the length of time. It's not the who can do it. We will all agree it is the judges. Nobody's arguing that.
Yeah.
But you made a good point. I said, how can we deal with reducing the length of time persons spend on remand? And I think in the judgment, and Sean asked me if I did read it, but I do know, I believe that they raise the issue of length of time on remand. Should there be some sort of consideration that if I am there for murder even, and it takes how many years, should there be some kind of cutoff point at which that person should maybe be entitled to bail, all things being considered? There's got to be something to deal with the length of time. I think that is the issue, not the right to grant bail. That has been determined.
Caller? Still with us? Okay, well, thank you, caller, if you're gone. I mean, there's some relevance to the whole innocent until proven guilty concept, but then the flip side to that is, in the States, there are anecdotal situations that are popping up more and more where people got bail, murderers, they're awaiting trial for murder, and then they literally, while awaiting trial for murder, commit another murder. And in those cases, I think a lot of the argument is, well, these are not the first time they've run afoul of the law. So there's a certain amount of history. You look at their record, and then you make a determination. Repeat offenders, I'm sure everybody would say it would be reasonable if they get a lot less leeway in the consideration for bail. Although it still could happen that they might be innocent, right? Just because they committed crimes before, including murders before, doesn't mean that they committed this murder that's under consideration. However, you can't necessarily fault a system for saying, well, we want to err on the side of caution because you are a repeat offender. For first-time offenders, then it becomes a bit more tricky. But as Karen said, if remand wasn't so long and the process was quick enough, okay, you might be in remand for a few months. That's a much different conversation to like what we saw with Akeem Charles, right? When it was years.
And he's a common example, as I said when I was on the show before. I think what the that bail act and that bail decision of the Privy Council was more about than anything else, because I don't think, as they even said, that the Attorney General said they're very, 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 if any case where someone who is charged with murder is given bail. And that applied to the United Kingdom also. All right, so they recognize the reasons why you would not give bail for murder. But I think what that case really was about, taking away judicial discretion. They're saying you can't take away the judicial discretion of the judge to determine whether or not. Whether he will, he hardly will. There are very few instances that they do. But if you did that, what you're doing is then, that's the separation of powers argument. Because if the judges can't exercise their judicial discretion, then the executive, by passing through the laws and imposing the laws, are the ones who are really calling the shots. I don't mean that literally. So I think the greater point was not so much to let people free, because I don't think there are many instances at all, but it's really to make sure that you do not take that away from a judge.
One of the interesting things one of our media ambassadors said is when you look at the number of crimes that goes through the judicial system, right? It's just way too many if it was each crime was done by an individual as first-time offenders, we don't have hundreds of thousands of criminals. So there are a lot of repeat offenders, which is why I haven't necessarily gone over the records myself, but that makes perfect sense to me. I think we need to understand too that I guess the government is trying to make the system harsher on these repeat offenders to try to discourage people from having a life of crime. But at the end of the day, there's a whole host of other things. Right, that's not really going to work. There's a whole host of other things.
No, but I don't think you're right about that either.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because now, you see, I try to be fair, and I try to be fair-handed on it. Government sometimes are under pressure, to do something. Or to be seen to be doing something. So I think that whole issue with regard to the Bail Act was really an attempt to say, look, be serious about murder, when they very well know that they do not give bail for murder, have not given bail for, and understandably so, as is the case in the United Kingdom. But it is to be seen politically, from my point of view, to be seen to be doing something to get a handle on the murder rate. And the real handle you need to start dealing with is to have a holistic approach, starting also with remand. Just to mention, countries like the Scandinavian countries, which our Mr. Trump, President Trump, seems to think are very, very good countries, the best countries in the world. But the truth of the matter is they have a murder rate of about 1 per 100,000. Very, very low. And it is not just because of one thing they're doing. It's a whole host of the justice system, a holistic approach. But I think politically, if you ask me, why they went with that was to make the government seem to be doing something, because they knew that the reality was that people do not get bail for murder. That's my view on it.
And the thing is, there's a lot of other things to fix. And one could imagine that if remand was fixed, they would be able to do more, right? But then the other thing, of course, is when you have a 13% detection rate, whether or not you give bail kind of seems to be besides the point. There's 87% of murderers are just still there, floating in the wind. That this would not affect.
Stand trial then, let them stand trial and let them be, either acquitted or, convicted. But that is a
look how long the Sean Luke case took.
Oh Lord.
Right? Yes. And this was one could argue a high-profile case with a brutal murder. Yeah, this is not just wrong place, wrong time, a mugging gone wrong, or something. As much as murder is not mundane, relatively speaking, mundane as that.
Society.
Yeah, well, in Trinidad society, yeah, exactly. So,
I think, given waiting for cause, I think then it gives me a chance to mention the Sedition Act. That was another thing which I think I do support the government with this also, because the Sedition Act is not defamation. It's specific. Oh, we got a call, so
okay, we have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, San Fernando.
Good morning, Sean. Morning, Karen. There's a couple issues here. Karen, can this be fixed with constitutional reform? Because I am one of the persons of the citizens who have been calling for constitutional reform for quite a while now. Now, there needs to be justice for the aggrieved. I have an issue with the fact that people who commit murder need to be dealt with in the same way. I have an issue, a lot of the population I know would have an issue with one, bail for murder, and two, not instituting the death penalty. And I think it is time that we pass a decision to have a referendum and put these things to the people and let the people decide. Because all of this we're talking about here, the population of Trinidad and Tobago has no say in what we're talking about. These are the politicians that making the politician and the judiciary that making decisions that we have a problem with, and I think they need to get our opinion on this matter. Thank you.
I would just say this. My understanding is that some jurisdictions, in order to make the kind of constitutional changes and one of them was CCJ versus the Privy Council. Some jurisdictions require referendum. And politicians are very concerned about doing the referendum because when they're not successful in getting the country to support them in relation to the referendum, politically it's not a good move for them. That happened to St. Vincent. I think it happened to Jamaica. And it is seen from a political lens, which you can't get around it, that if you do not get the support by way of, if referendum is the way you have to go, and you do not succeed that way, it is seen as a negative for the government. Some jurisdictions, I believe ours is one of them. We have two kinds of majorities. The 3/5, which is the one I spoke of with regard to the Bail Act, which still the Privy Council overthrew with the Section 13 provision. But we also have another type of majority called the 4/5 majority. That's a very high majority. And I think you need that in Trinidad and Tobago to get constitutional change. So whilst many people advocate constitutional change, the reality is, the Constitution is your highest law of your land. And therefore, if you infringe my constitutional rights on the basis that there's no other domestic law to cover it, if I am successful, that's the end of the story there. Right? So you have to understand, I believe that in Trinidad, it's good to talk about constitutional change. It's been around for many years, constitutional reform, but you need a special majority, I think, in Trinidad of 4/5. And I don't know if we could ever come to the time where we'll see a 33-3, which may not even be good for our country.
Yeah.
That we can see an opposition supporting, because their role, unfortunately, under our Westminster model, is to oppose.
Well, okay, San Fernando, I don't know if you had another point to make, but okay, all right, so we do have a caller from St. James. Good morning, caller. I'll respond to San Fernando after. Good morning, caller. You're on there?
Yes, good morning. Good morning to you and Karen.
Morning.
Morning.
I don't know if Karen could probably throw some light on something here for me, because I am getting kind of confused here in terms of a managerial situation. The judges, it goes back to the judges, the how do you call it, Privy Council judgments concerning the Marcia Ayres Caesar situation. I'm kind of getting confused in terms of from a management point of view. The judges that took the decision to reinstate or find that the council and the chief justice position was not correct. In other words, from what I read, they coerced the lady to leave the job.
Right.
They report to the chief justice, those three judges, I believe.
Yes.
They report to the chief justice. Isn't it sort of kind of a strange, or I want to know how this will work out?
Well, okay. Let me just say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
One, the judicial legal system, he may be the chief justice, but judges are independent, so maybe they report him, but he can't take them and tell them to overturn their decision. I have my views on that whole thing, and I prefer not to comment on it at this point, because I think they will go to the Privy Council. This is an indication. I think the Attorney General should go to the Privy Council, because as much as, just to say this, as much as persons say, I know as a fact, because I have friends and people I know who are judges, and I know as a fact that when the Chief Justice offers you an appointment to be a judge, and if you are a magistrate, he asks you, do you have any part to the matter? Even if he doesn't ask you that, he's not, you are going to be a judge. What is a judge? A judge is a person that's blind and to unfairness. We hold you to an extremely high standard. So even if he did not ask you, should you not have said? You have 53 parted matters. Didn't you have that duty? So don't put it all on the Chief Justice. What about you saying that? That in itself says a lot to me. And I could say, what some people may say is, there's a line of a person waiting to become judges. Now, if she has to hear all those 53 parted matters, maybe there's somebody standing in line that will reach there before, And by the time they reach there, sorry, no more vacancies available.
We have a call.
So let's let the Privy Council
I just
decide.
want to say, I understand that, you know, the ruling technically might be correct, but I think ethically speaking, I agree with what Karen said there. That situation was not right with what Air Caesar did, right? So I don't, even if technically the ruling is correct, right, because I find something was very, and I'm not happy with it. So that's all I'll say
and
about that.
let me just tell you what I can say. Don't think all the judges are good friends. That's all I will say on that.
Okay, we have a caller from Diego Martin. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
And very, very good morning to Ms. Teixeira, the Honorable former Finance Minister. I never got the opportunity to big you up on your honesty and integrity 101 with Brian Manning and the local government minister. I think you have to redo that course with them, because they continue to, you know, give a narrative that is false. So they didn't understand. And I know that might be in sync with one of them who basically used up all their time at university to get a degree. And I'm not going to say nothing more.
Okay, I think you shouldn't say anything
more. On
more.
my main contribution, where I am calling on the various independent institutions, Police Service Commission, the LATT, and sometime the MAT. And why I'm saying that? We had a situation with an Attorney General who basically has question and integrity to answer. And I believe the Law Association have set a precedent for people and senior attorneys to do what they want. I think they should have disciplined him hard. If you had to remove him on the roll, or make him a junior counsel, if it's that he wants. The second thing is, I want to talk about the Police Service Commission. They have to instill some discipline into the police service. Yes, there's a lot of guns. They find them now. I don't know if it's a particular narrative they want to show that the current office holder is very, very good and she's doing her job, but that it's failing with me. Because all of a sudden you could get nice guns with prestige. And I'm yet to see the, what they call it, the body cameras telling us where we're going into the Gucci Trail. And added to that, there's a policeman who recently in front of a bank. I am hoping that that police officer is disciplined forthwith. The tribunal comes in and makes sure he doesn't benefit from my taxpayers' money, because they hit me left, right, and center with additional tax, water, everything. And I can't see I eat a food policeman and the Police Service Commission and by extension, the intelligent people. The last one is Matt. And I'm very, very hurt. And I'm going to call out the newspaper, the Newsday, on an article on Saturday where the president was at a function with some students. And you know how they spell her name? They said kangaroo.
I think I was a mistake. I don't think I was a mistake.
So that tells me something is wrong with the journalistic integrity in some of the newspaper.
I think we agree with
another newspaper, The Guardian of Democracy. Recently there was an issue in Guyana with where the Guyana government canceled an Australian arrangement. Try something. And there was a Twitter account with our Trinidad Guardian. And you know what they say? The Guyana government concealed the arrangement. Concealed and cancelled is two different words. So somebody in these organizations,
that concealed and cancelled, another type
and Matt, and I'm hoping Matt here in my mouth, you have to come out and say something. If we are to move forward, all our agencies are collapsing, and Trinidad is not going nowhere. Good morning and have a nice day.
And I'm just going to say that it shows that we have a listening audience who are able to analyze and are not being easily fooled. And I congratulate you for your insight into the matter. I might not agree with everything you said, but I do think you made some very salient points.
To the defense of media institutions, but also this is a defense of criticism. So take this for what you will. There are courses that basically have you do error correction with regards to grammar and I think spelling with regards to newspaper publications. I had to take one of those courses, right? Because I started a mass communications degree before I got this gig, and this gig, you know, I'm not really too
It's
keen.
more than a gig, you're big in the dance.
Right, so and also COVID, I'm not great with online classes, but the point is, Newsday is notorious with regards to errors like that. Like we're not talking big reporting errors and ethical errors. We're talking spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, right? Notorious with regards to that. So on one hand,
concealed and thing is a different one, right?
Somebody had a brain fart when they typed that. That's all I'm gonna say. So somebody had maybe it was.
You better go back to that mass communication course.
Maybe it was an early morning kind of situation where they were lacking sleep. I don't know.
To call it.
But just say no. We could no. It's time to close the show.
I thought someone
that was the last call. So with regards to Newsday though, I understand and it would be very great if they could clean that up, but I don't think it was anything intentional.
You know what I will say though? I have been following the newspapers and I think I don't necessarily watch electronic, but definitely the what you call it?
The physical paper.
Yes. And I really do see a trend. And I see a trend of not reporting certain things, reporting certain things, reporting it in a particular way, and I just get the impression that the media is under some kind of pressure that their independence that we would want from them is somehow being compromised. That is just my opinion, and I'm not giving an example, but that's been my general view.
That is true, and it's compounded by the economic pressure, right? It's not caused by, it's not limited to, it's compounded by the economic pressure. Last thing I'll say, thing I want to say, with regards to us not having a say, and that's why San Fernando wants a referendum, right? Because we don't have a say. Politicians don't have a say, we don't have a say. All I'll just say is this, technically, ideally, in a democratic country, our say is represented by the people we elect to represent us. That's why the House is called the House of Representatives.
Up to a point, though.
Up to a point. But I think
people
of course
participating in legislation. That's why you have white people, green people.
People have to participate, but then also
you
have to hold your politicians to account to properly represent you. So the state of our political environment now is in part, not solely, but at least in part, our responsibility. It's because of how we've allowed it to reach this point. We elected them.
I think people have gotten cynical. And anyway, that's another
People
discussion.
are cynical.
So next week, I will talk about sedition.
Okay. I mean,
unless something new comes up.
Let's not connect those dots here. We don't have time for that. But my point is, Mr. Sarmando, I agree with you on a practical level. You are completely right. It's just unfortunate that we have reached this point where, you know, people do feel disenfranchised, and despite the fact that we have all kind of elections, just an election, but to what extent do we feel we're being heard? That's very questionable and subjective. Folks, we could make today a good day if we try, as my co-host Keaton Shaw always says. I want to thank all the callers, of course, thank the good lady herself for stopping by with us every Wednesday. Folks, we will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
I am Rondell Donowa, and you are watching WESN, the content capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the home store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue, St. Anne's. WESN 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. Metropolitan Bookshop, Ariapita Avenue, Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
been happening with the evacuations?
Well, massive disruptions at the Versailles castle. Le Château de Versailles this morning evacuated for the third time in only a few days. The threat was sent via the French police website. It's difficult to know exactly the exact level of a threat, if there really was a bomb or not. But there's no chance being taken, no risk worth being taken, and that's why it was evacuated, even if it meant evacuating thousands of tourists from the castle of Versailles. You mentioned it, 6 airports also evacuated today, so mass disruptions for travellers. Among the airports evacuated, you had Lille, Beauvais, Toulouse. Now it does seem that normal activity, if you will, has resumed in most of those airports, and police sources say the threats came by email. Again, we don't really know what the threats were, but no risk is being taken. France is currently at the highest level of security alert following the killing of that French professor in Arras on Friday by a former pupil aged 20. That professor was called Dominique Bernard. French on its highest level of security alert in the so-called Vigipirate plan, scheme, if you will, and this highest level since the Bataclan attacks. Paris, France in general, in this situation, and authorities don't want to take any risks, and this level of security also enables the authorities to deploy a maximum number of forces. And as the Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin has been saying, forces are on alert, but you also have security services working hard to detect, to prevent any attack.
So you mentioned that highest level of alert, the incidents we saw in Belgium, the 2 Swedish nationals killed. The border police and gendarmes increased their 7,000 officers on the streets. Now, on the situation with Israel, we also heard from President Macron condemning the attack on the hospital. It seemed to be very short. Did he give any indication of, well, what some have said, the Israelis and President Biden saying that it looks like, he said in his words, it was the other side? What's Emmanuel Macron saying?
Well, he's not taking sides. Emmanuel Macron basically trying to say that there are casualties, on civilian casualties on both sides, and that's what he's condemning. We heard him earlier, the French president, condemning the violence and also condemning the bombings on the Gaza Strip. It's very difficult for the French government to really take sides, and it doesn't want to, simply because it doesn't want this conflict to spill over on French soil. And France has taken a position already regarding demonstrations, for instance. The Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, says he doesn't want pro-Hamas demonstrations to take place. But NGOs, on the other hand, want these pro-Palestinian demonstrations to take place. That's what they're saying, and that's why they've been calling the highest court in France, the Conseil d'État, to give a verdict to try to overturn the French government's decision to ban these demonstrations. The Conseil d'État will announce its verdict later on today. They tell me presumably early evening, and that will also be important because there's a planned demonstration for tomorrow. It's forbidden, but a planned demonstration for tomorrow in Paris by pro-Palestinian NGOs. And given the tragedy in Gaza, given the hundreds who've died in the explosions in the Gaza hospital, well, you can expect quite a lot of people to turn up. And the French government wants to avoid this government to spill over. They want to avoid either side, Israeli or Palestinian, to bring demonstrators to the streets of Paris, cause tensions. The French government says it wants unity and solidarity in these very difficult times.
Clovis Caselli, thank you. Our senior reporter here in Paris. Now, one consequence of the bombing of the hospital in Gaza is it's triggered protests across several Middle East and North African states, demonstrations in Jordan, Libya, the French embassy in Tunis, and also larger Palestinian territory, the occupied West Bank, where demonstrators clashed with its own security forces and calling too for Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, to resign. Emerald Maxwell has this update. In fact, we can go to Beirut by phone. I think we can speak to our correspondent there. Let's cross there now because we have our correspondent on the line. We have Rawat Taha. Give us a sense of the situation you're hearing, because we're looking at the moment, I think we might be able to get live pictures, in fact, of protests outside the US Embassy in Lebanon, in Beirut. Brings it to the date to the situation you're hearing on the ground, Rawad. OK, well, I can still stay with these pictures for a second. These are pictures that we've had around the embassy security forces in Lebanon forced to act. Again, it gives you the sense of the wider spread, this geopolitical ripple effect caused by the outrage of the hospital bombing in which 500 people died. These are scenes from Lebanon at the moment. We'll try and cross later to our correspondent on the ground there. Stay with us here on France 24. We'll be back in a few minutes' time.
The world is ever-changing. The news doesn't wait.
France 24 gives a global perspective that an educated, intelligent, and active viewer is going to want to have to be able to fully understand the issues of the day.
That's why it will always be there to help make sense of world events.
J'ai l'habitude de suivre France 24 partout où je me trouve, et ce grâce à mon smartphone, parce que je ne reste pas souvent devant la télé.
Quand une information circule sur la toile, j'utilise l'application de France 24 pour vérifier l'authenticité.
For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what, France 24 is with you everywhere, all the time.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world coming up. Abortion laws in Argentina under threat, with a far-right presidential candidate declaring if he wins,